We are very grateful to our sponsor this evening. More Able Than This is sponsored by the Music Department at Georgia College and State University. In addition to bachelor's degrees in music and in music therapy, including a BA plus MAT path to initial music teacher certification, GCSU offers an online master's degree in music education for certified teachers seeking to improve or expand their knowledge and skills, as well as a hybrid Master of Arts in Teaching degree for those seeking initial teacher certification in Georgia. We accept certified and licensed teachers from across the U.S., and Georgia certification is reciprocal with most other states. So don't let state boundaries deter you from applying. Apply now to start in spring or summer 2025. For more information about these degree programs, contact me at tina.holmes-davis@gcsu.edu. That's tina.holmes-davis@gcsu.edu. Able Than This, the podcast where we discuss everything related to disability and music education. More Able Than This is sponsored by the Music Department at Georgia College and State University, Georgia's designated public liberal arts university. Today we're going to be talking about having a service dog in the marching band with Dr. Justin Mertz. Dr. Mertz is the Associate Director of Bands at the University of Northern Iowa. He directs the Panther Marching Band, conducts the Symphonic Band, and teaches courses in music education. He holds bachelor's and master's degrees from Syracuse University and a Doctor of Musical Arts degree from Boston University. Go Terriers! Dr. Mertz has contributed to the educational series Teaching Music Through Performance in Band, has produced and conducted on a number of Syracuse University wind ensemble recordings for Mark Records, and is an active guest conductor, clinician, and adjudicator throughout the United States, where he works with students at all levels. All right, welcome, Dr. Mertz. Today we're here to talk about marching a service dog. So can you tell us briefly about how you got into the position of having a service dog in the marching band?
Well, thanks so much for having me, and I'd be happy to talk about it. Last February, I received an email from a prospective student named Gabby, and she explained to me that she had a friend of hers in the band at UNI, and the student was in our color guard, still is in our color guard, having a great time, and she said, "Hey, my friend said I should probably reach out to you. Here's my situation. I'm attending college at a very small private university. I'm not even going to say the state. I don't remember the institution, and I'm actually glad that I don't. So, and she said, I'm going to college to be a teacher, and I love music, but at this small university, they're not letting me participate in any music making activities because I use a service dog."
Okay.
And my friend said I should reach out to you because maybe it's possible that I could participate in the Panther Marching Band at UNI if I were to transfer there. And at first, I sort of blinked at my screen because, first of all, those were all brand new sentences for me, all of them, right? I have a service dog. I want to do music stuff. I go to this university. They're not letting me do it because of the dog. I kind of needed to like breathe for a minute. and I wrote back to her as soon as I sort of collected myself. I said, "Hey, I am totally open to this. We need to have a conversation. Let's get together and talk, and let me ask you a bunch of questions so I can learn more about you and what your situation is and what it is that you might need." And she said, she got right back to me too. I mean, it was like bang, 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 right back and forth. And we scheduled an online, call like this. And I asked her questions like, to the extent that you're comfortable, tell me about your medical condition. And she was very forthcoming about it. And I said, okay, now tell me about your dog. Tell me about your dog's needs, right? What does the dog do for you? What does the dog need to be able to do that for you?
Sure.
And then I asked her questions like, hey, so you've been in marching band in high school, so you know that marching bands are very loud, and we are a very large marching band. So how are we going to deal with protecting the dog's hearing? And she said, I already have hearing protection. I was like, great. And then I said, how does the dog deal with chaotic environments, right? Because if the dog can't perform in that environment, then that's a safety risk to her, because
Sure.
the dog is there to help her live her life. And she said the dog is actually completely fine with anything, and she was not wrong about that. It is hysterical to see the dog just sitting there with droopy eyes, kind of relaxing, while there's a 250-piece band, like full volume behind her, right? And people moving, and a college football game and stadium, and the dog just sits there. It's really something. She was not lying about that at all.
She was
Anyway,
like, yeah,
yeah,
the dog was like, well, it's not my circus. Y'all
right.
do that.
Yeah, and I said to her, okay, well, this is all great. And I said, tell me about your medical condition. And I have her permission to discuss
Okay.
this in a little bit of detail. It's called POTS.
Mm-hmm.
What it stands for, POTS, escapes me at the moment. But essentially what happens is Gabby passes out, and it can happen without warning. And the
Mm-hmm.
dog's job is to give her a warning so that she can lay down, so that she doesn't fall and hit her head, essentially,
Sure.
is what it boils
Sure.
down to, right? And when Gabby passes out, it's not life threatening unless she falls and hits her head. And she can be passed out for as little as 30 seconds or as much as 7 to 10 minutes. And I said, okay, so when that happens, what do we do? Do we call an ambulance for you? She said, nope. She said, I just lay there, I get up, and I go about my day. And I said, okay. So I said, well, it sounds to me like this can work. And I said, what instrument do you play? And she said, well, I'm a pit percussionist. I said, that's even better, because you're already on the sideline. And if you get a warning from your dog at any time, you're right there, man. You can just go, no problem. So that was already one big thing solved, right? Like what to do if she gets a signal from the dog in the middle of a rehearsal or performance. She's already at the sideline, right? She doesn't have to go anywhere. She doesn't have to travel. Great.
And
right?
in the video I saw, I'm sorry, in the video I saw, she was playing crash cymbals, and I was more
Yes.
worried about her passing out and those cymbals falling on her weird.
Right. So thankfully, the dog gives her enough advance warning where she would have enough time to get to the sideline. So originally the plan was she was not going to be on the field at all.
Mm-hmm.
But then she came for band camp, right? Like all the other students, and there's Winnie doing her thing, right? And we were kind of talking, and we said, listen, the front line during our pregame show picks up crash cymbals and does the pregame show on the field. You do not have to do that. We don't expect
Sure.
that of you. She said, well, I'll get enough warning and I can leave the field if I need to.
Mm-hmm.
And my staff and I looked at her and said, well, we're going to give it a shot.
Well, sure.
And we're just going to give it a shot. So we tried it, and she has had a few episodes during the semester, but never during a performance.
Yeah.
And no, on a performance day before a game once, but it was very short, and never during a performance. And then we said, well, we're going to see how the dog does. And it turns out the dog got very quickly very good at anticipating Gabby's movements. I think the dog learned the drill, if I'm honest with
Sure.
you, and knew when to move, when to stop, and just when Gabby moved and stopped, Winnie moved and stopped. And we put Gabby on the end of the line so that there was extra room, and everybody just, it sounds so much simpler, but everybody, we just had the dog on the field, right? And once we knew how to manage Gabby's medical condition, and once we knew that the dog's safety was not threatened or at risk, because a healthy Winnie means Gabby is safe, right?
Yes.
Once we knew those things, it was really just just letting it happen, really, and it did. And Gabby performed like any other student. Winnie was there, right, and did a really terrific job. We never ever had to stop what we were doing because of Winnie. We never had to repeat a rep because of Winnie. I wish some of my students would learn drill as quickly as Winnie seemed to, because she did a great job sticking to Gabby, and she's attached to Gabby. She wears like a tether around her midsection.
I saw.
And yeah, and Winnie just did her service responsibility. She's very well trained, and her disposition as a dog is really good, and she loves the attention, if I'm
Oh, I'm
honest with
sure.
you. And
I would
and
never
that's
get anything done.
right, yeah, yeah, and that's how and that is the sort of nutshell version of how we got a dog on the field. And it all started because she reached out to me, and I remember feeling so sad for her that, like, that was something that was a problem in her life that she had to solve, that she was being told no for that reason. And I
Mm,
realized that not every adaptation is possible all the time. I
no.
understand that, right? But the dog just sits there, and her medical condition doesn't really require significant adjustment, or it's not. I mean, it's dramatic if you don't know what it is, because there's this
Sure.
person laying on the floor unconscious for a little bit. But um, you know, it having done it, I'm even more saddened by the fact that she was denied that opportunity at the previous institution, because it turns out it was not that big of a deal for us.
And see, I love that. So I think you've already answered my first question. And I have a few questions my students gave me that they thought of that I didn't. But my first question was, did you give her more space, or was she able to stick to the that two-step interval? But you said you put her on the end.
We put her on the end of the line, and there were people to her left and nobody on her right. So the dog was just on her right, if I'm remembering this correctly. And other than that, we didn't have to widen any intervals or anything. And it never got closer than two-step. And Winnie is a slender dog. She's a golden retriever, right? A healthy one. So she doesn't take up more than one step's worth of space. So the dog never, like I said, we never had to make any adjustments for the dog. So.
And I did see in the video that I watched, there were, I guess it was the pregame, because she was on the field with the cymbals. They were playing, and the snare drums were still. They were standing, and the cymbals were facing the snare drums, as cymbals are wont to do.
Mm-hmm.
And Winnie was kind of standing between them, and then when the
Mm-hmm.
snare drum started playing, she moved herself out of the way.
Yeah. Yeah, and Winnie has great instincts as a well-trained animal, and just took care of herself, right? Because
So
Winnie
one of my
Winnie's formally trained
students,
and fully trained service dog. So
yes. So I'm sorry, one of my students who's an Army veteran and a dad, his first question was, what additional paperwork did you need? Like, was there any releases or anything that we needed?
maybe I shouldn't admit this in public, but none.
So just like a
So
regular.
well, we're a state university, right? So we're not allowed to discriminate against people who are in protected classes, and disability is a protected class, right?
Yes.
So legally, we already are required, and in my opinion, we are morally
Yes.
required to, right, make these kinds of things happen. And service dogs are welcome on our campus because, if a student needs one, then a student needs one.
Yes.
And marching band at our university, like many colleges and universities, is a course,
Uh-huh.
and she's enrolled in the course, and the service dog is allowed to be in the classes, and
For
that's
sure.
it. So it already fit within an existing policy framework.
All right. So maybe if you were a high school director, there might be, more involved in a situation where maybe marching band requires physicals and things like that.
Yeah, maybe, right. And I think that varies a lot from state to state and locality to locality.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, at least in public schools, I'm not sure about private schools, but at least in public schools, they're going to be subject to the same requirements, right?
Yes.
For things like not discriminating against members of protected classes. So
Mm-hmm. So then I know Gabby is a percussionist who just happens to be a front ensemble musician, which solves a lot of problems because we can put her in the front. And that would be kind of the ideal place for somebody, like you said, who may or may not be conscious throughout the show. But if it were a wind instrumentalist, what could you see in terms of like getting them started, especially with like maybe any paperwork, but definitely drill writing and things like that would be possibly required to just keep the service dog safe and to keep the student in the drill so that the form doesn't suffer?
that's a great question. Um, you hit it on the head when you said, being a member of the drum line, the drill is a little bit different. They require more
Yes.
spacing, right? because the instruments are a little bit larger. So if I were designing drill for a wind or brass player that was using a service dog, I would make sure that they were spaced appropriately to include the dog. And honestly, good drill writing doesn't really get smaller than two-step intervals anyway, in most cases, right? I write a lot of drill for bands large and small, and you're not really getting that close. And if we were, then we would either put Gabby and Winnie somewhere where we could make it work, or, and this is the thing about marching drill, in a college pregame show, we make letters and we spell things and we make pictures and things, very traditional, right? But otherwise, we march, corps style for our halftime shows, right? We have the freedom to choose what the drill looks like.
Yes.
And I will have the freedom to do whatever I need to in the drill to incorporate anyone who might need extra space. And then I would just do that, right? Like I don't mean to sound dismissive, obviously, about the question,
that's wonderful.
But I don't think it really requires, right, so much extra. And in the instances where we're trying to spell things or whatever, then we're going to place Gabby and Winnie where they need to be to have the space that they need to, right, to make it work. And honestly, if Gabby's in a tight vertical as part of a letter, for example, as let's say a clarinet player, she's in a tight vertical, and then there's the dog next to her, right? The letter's still going to look like the letter.
Yes.
Right. And I'm not worried about that. So I'm not, it's just not something I'm going to spend a lot of time and energy fretting over, because in my mind, the dog and the performer are the same thing. And one dog from way up high, it's not going to break the form or make something look wrong.
Good. And that's what I'm always hoping for. My husband is a high school band director, and he doesn't write his own drill because he has enough to do. But I hear him annually on the phone with his drill writer going, okay, and I want this trombone player to never be the line leader, T5, whatever it is, they're never to be the line leader because they're a freshman, whatever it is. And I know, even though he doesn't write it, he does have control. I want the soloist to be here and I want the band to move around them, kind of stuff. So I love, actually, I just published a book, and I'm not actually trying to make a pitch for my book, but just to say, I use universal design and learning as the foundation of all of my things. So I love any time that, we fit, people with disabilities just fit into the structure as it is. So I love.
Yeah, and it turns out marching band's a great place for that. And who knew?
It's a great idea. So how long did it take the band to stop crowding around trying to pet Winnie the whole time?
Well, thankfully, they never did that, because I spoke with my section leaders and my student leadership, who are a terrific bunch of kids. I mean, they really are kids. I mean, they're up to 22 years old. But and I said, hey, there's going to be a student with a service dog. The deal with service dogs is you can't really just walk up to them and pet them. You know how it is, right? And I said, just please let everyone in your sections just talk to the student. Don't pet the dog, right? Because I didn't want to establish like a neutral zone around Gabby where people were afraid to talk to her. Sure. I was like, we got to make this person feel welcome. We've got to congratulate them and affirm their choice to join our organization like we would any other student. But we're not going to pet the dog unless we're invited to. Sure. And everybody got that memo, and everybody just did it, and that was it.
Good. That's outstanding. So a big question that my undergraduates had was, what would happen if you have Gabby and Winnie, and then you have a person with a severe dog allergy?
When you mentioned that question in the initial email, when you first reached out to me, I have been thinking about that, because that is really tough, right? How do you balance two competing needs?
Because both of them are valid, yeah.
Yeah, right. Both of which are nobody's fault, right? And the way I think I would handle it is this way. We take all kinds of medical information from our students, and we did check to make sure that no one had a dog allergy, because we do ask what they're allergic to as part of the medical sort of inquiry we make, and no one reported an allergy to dogs. And if someone did, marching bands perform in such wide open spaces that it's my belief that we could have enough distance between them. Now, if they were in the same section, then I would see about having Gabby or the other student perform on the sideline and switch back and forth, right, and have equal time, right, but not being next to each other. so it's not really a clean answer, but the answer is we would find a way to balance the accommodations to make sure everybody would have the maximal experience possible.
Sure. And that's what my daddy said. He was like, they can ride on separate buses.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So I love, yeah, pragmatic. And that's what we need is, as a teacher, we want to make this work, but then when we actually sit down to make it work, so many young teachers especially are looking for the right answer. And I always tell them there is no right, there's effective. And so I like the fact that in practice, what you're doing is just what's effective.
Right. And I think added to that, what I would say to this undergraduate student is, in my experience, I've been in higher ed just about 20 years and a few years in the public schools before that. In my experience, students want to know that you care about them, that you're invested in them, that you're looking
Yes.
out for them, and that you're trying to do right by them. And if students, maybe not always, right, but I feel like if students perceive that from their teachers, then that's a lot of it right there, right? So
Yes.
that it would be my hope that if we had to balance those two, I don't want to say competing, but if we had those two potentially incompatible special needs at first, the students would see us acting in good faith, really making an effort, and then they would help us help them.
Yes.
And then we would probably be fine. That would be my hope.
Outstanding. Yeah, and that was the question. We spent 45 minutes on it. But what if,
Yeah.
So, but they're young and they're still learning, so. Was there anything that surprised you about like an issue that you didn't anticipate before it became a need?
No, I don't think so. Gabby and I, we had that first conversation, and we had one more follow up one, and then when she arrived for band camp, we kind of confirmed everything, and we really tried to game out and anticipate everything, and I prepared my staff, I prepared my student leadership, so I felt like we had a pretty good handle on everything, and nothing really emerged, surprising us. The first time Gabby had an episode where she did pass out, Gabby's section leader was actually really concerned for her, and she actually got like a little upset, and I had to take her aside and I'd be like, hey, do you remember I said like this is what it would look like?
Mm-hmm.
And she's fine now. Gabby's laying there unconscious, right? And I'm like, hey, and I always try to model. It's kind of a joke in the band. We say like rule number one is no freaking out, right? So I'm speaking to her really calmly, and I'm trying to model for her like, I'm not worried about this. So let's just keep it calm and let Gabby wake up. And when Gabby wakes up and gets up and starts performing like, rehearsing like this didn't happen, you'll see what I mean. And that's what happened, right? And then the next Gabby, if I had to guess, she probably only had maybe, I don't know, between 7 and 10 episodes for the entire 3 months, right, that we were working. After that, this person sort of like, okay, I know what this looks like. I know what to expect. So I was a little surprised at how upset she was. I'm not surprised that she cared so much, but she was really afraid. And I said, oh, this is something that I have to manage here, right? Because I don't want this student to feel fear about this, right? And she's like, well, what do I do? I was like, hey, you actually don't have to do anything.
Yeah. And that's wonderful, and that'll be good experience for her to take.
Yeah.
I remember when I was teaching middle school band, I used to put my percussionist exclusively on mallets for a portion of the year, or if I had not enough parts to a percussion piece, because people who write lower level music sometimes forget that we have more percussionists than we need. So I would double them up on like flute parts or whatever. So anyway, there would be 2 to an instrument. So I looked in the back of the room. There was one instrument where one of the people was missing and the other one was going. So the young man that was missing was having a seizure and was on the floor, kind of wrapped around the young man who was freaking out's legs. But I remember that I've dealt with seizures for a long time, both personally and as a teacher. And so I knew what to do. But I had to send the little man who was next to him home because he was freaking out so hard because he didn't know, he thought he had broken him.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And if you don't know, thankfully, Gabby's, I think seizures are actually a little bit more potentially acute than Gabby's particular condition, based on my experience, because I've had students have that too. You know, every teacher has, you teach long enough,
Yeah.
right? And and I think that because seizures could be potentially more acute, they could be more um, nervous making, right?
Yeah.
If you're around that, and if you're a young person, you don't know what that looks like,
Yeah.
or what that is, and yeah, I could easily see that. So
Which may be why your section leader freaked out because she wasn't differentiating the loss of consciousness from a
yeah,
seizure.
sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know the Gabby's condition. It's not really a dramatic loss of consciousness. She just lays down, closes her eyes, and that's it. And but still, like when you're trying to like get somebody to wake up, right? And
And
I
they
say
won't.
in air quotes because they're not asleep, right? But
Yeah.
and they don't, then you're, what? Oh my gosh, right? So, but once the student sort of understood, and I modeled for her like, hey, we're not going to be super concerned about it. This is what it is. It's going to be fine, right?
Yeah. We
Um,
knew this was going to happen.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and everything worked the way it was supposed to. So.
All right. So do you think if you had to start again, you would have prepared your section leaders for that, maybe, and your people a little more for, real, or do you think you did the best you could and it was just something they had to experience?
I think both things are probably true at the same time, right? Like I believe I did the best I could knowing what I knew going in.
Yes.
But I also think now, with the benefit of hindsight, I could have said to this section leader, hey, this is what it's going to look like exactly, right? Here's what Gabby wants us to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And and really made sure, right? And the problem is because it's unpredictable, you know,
Yeah.
when it happened for the first time, I was not there. I was up
Yes.
high looking at, right? Right. But if I just happened to be closer at the time, right? Like I could have I would have been able to handle it a little bit more immediately, and a little bit differently. Um, so yeah, I think both things are true at the same time. It's not a cop out answer, but
No, but yeah, I agree, and there's sometimes that we do the best we can do, and there's just, they've just got to go through it. And I'm
yeah,
thinking it's also about my pre-service teachers at the undergraduate level, we spend a lot of time going, well, you don't know what you don't know yet.
right. Yeah, that's very true.
I'm so impressed. And I brought it up a minute ago for a different reason, but I just actually published a book on teaching music to students with disability because nobody has ever asked us before. So I wrote it from the disabled perspective. And but I went through the whole thing, and I've used this for several years before I published it to teach my own music for exceptional children's class, and it never once occurred to me to include service dogs. I've included 13 IDEA accommodations, or sorry, words are hard, conditions and everything. Service dogs never even occurred to me.
Me either. So I don't blame you.
Yeah, but that's what I think. I was so excited. Actually, one of my colleagues, he went to school in the Midwest, and you'll forgive me, I don't remember where, but so he kind of keeps track of that region, and he told me about it one morning. So I actually emailed you the same day because I was like, a service dog.
Yeah, and it just goes to show you that if you do anything long enough, especially teaching music, you're gonna encounter just almost the totality of humanity, right? I mean,
Which
we're
is
gonna
what it
meet
should
so many
be.
different people. Yeah,
Yeah. And I tell my students all the time, if you say that, and it's fine to say it, but if you say music is for everyone, then I want to see butts and seats. I want to
right.
see everyone there. So do you think that because of this, people with disability may be more inclined to come into your program than they would have before?
Yeah, I hope so, right? It depends on obviously the nature of what
Certainly.
someone is living with, right?
Mm.
And so for somebody whose mobility was really limited, um, I would be completely fine with them using either a power chair in our drill or having someone push them around as might be needed. You've seen that sometimes, I'm sure,
Yeah.
online for marching bands, right? If that were something that were not possible, then we'd see about having them perform from the sideline. And if that couldn't work, then we're a comprehensive school of music at UNI, and we have groups of every size and type, and maybe a concert ensemble is where that person
Yeah.
makes music, right? So we, if the PMB wouldn't have worked out, we would have found a place for Gabby to make music. But thankfully,
Outstanding.
we were able to make the thing that she was most passionate about happen.
Sure. And I'm so excited. And I went to Auburn University for my master's degree, and we can make football jokes later because I love my school, but the football team is hit and miss. So anyway, there was, after I graduated, there was a young person there who was blind, a French horn player, if I recall. And I remember asking, because they marched this person in the marching band, but not in every show. The ones that they felt like that they could safely incorporate this person, they marched in the show. And my understanding is they learned the drill kind of tactily. They would put their hand behind somebody, and they were kind of kept at a steady interval from that person.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, that's exactly how I would handle that. Yeah.
And that also meant, I think, that once we put the instrument back into the situation and we were marching kind of free, if they got too far one way or the other, one of their section mates would say, "Hey, no, move this way," you know.
Right, exactly. And I think sometimes, I say this as someone who's directed marching bands pretty much my entire career. Um, I think sometimes we could get a little like forest for the trees, and some people might say like, well, how does that look? And my answer to that would be, it looks fine, because
Yeah,
what people what people are going to see is a student performing, right?
yes.
And that's what's going to matter. And I've adjudicated bands, right, that had someone in a power chair or being pushed in a wheelchair, right? And when I'm judging general effect, right, and I'm up there in the box and I'm talking into the recorder, right, I'm not saying, hey, that wheelchair is really distracting. What I'm noticing is how they're moving with everyone else and how they're part of the evolution of the visual performance. And it, so just because the specifics of it are different has never really been a great concern of mine, right? Because sometimes you just have to zoom out.
Sure, yes. And yeah, and like you said, from the box, it's not as big a deal as it might be when I'm standing right there. And honestly, if they're a half step off, so are like 12 other people in this field at any given time.
Yeah, right.
I'm just in general. Sorry, I'm not saying anything derogatory about your program,
Oh,
but
no, I understand.
so I'm so excited about this and about this opportunity because it never occurred to me, and I'm kind of glad it never occurred to you either, because that makes me feel like I'm not missing, big holes anywhere, but I'm excited to fill this hole. Is there anything else that you think that we should know as possibly music teachers or specifically band directors when we're thinking about incorporating people with like service dogs?
I would say it's kind of related to what I said just before about sometimes we miss the forest for the trees, right? And and I believe in my heart of hearts, despite what happened at this previous institution, I believe in my heart of hearts that the vast and overwhelming majority of music educators would react positively to a
Yeah,
student like Abby, right? The fact that one didn't, right? I mean, maybe they're the exception that proves the rule. I don't know, but um, you know, I, I would just remind everyone that um, there are a lot of different ways or a lot of different things that success looks like,
sure.
right? And I believe what we did was a success for two reasons. One, we provided a musical and educational experience for a student who wanted one and was willing to work hard. Okay, so that right there is a success. And then the second thing is maybe we've demonstrated that if you're willing to consider some things that maybe never occurred to you, right, you'll be very pleased with what you can accomplish for a student, for your students, because we are responsible to them, right? And I think I said in one of the first interviews I did about this, as soon as I got that email from Gabby after sort of getting over my shock at her experience, right, I metaphorically rolled up my sleeves and I went into band director mode. And you know how band directors are, like we like to solve problems, right? And we like to optimize. And I was like, well, I'm gonna see how we're gonna make this work, right? And I would like to think that most band directors have that instinct. So as long as you do, I mean, we can serve all the students, right? And it's okay if not 100 if they're not doing 100%, right? I think that close counts, as long as you're involving the student in the decision making process about how close to 100% we're getting, right? So like students can often be really good guides for us. Now, obviously, with younger students, like parents are going to be involved too, right? So
Sure.
Gabby's 19 years old, so Gabby and I can talk, right? And I've met Gabby's mom a couple times, and like they're great, but I didn't need that from them, right? But if you got a kid who's like 9 years old or something, right? Like the parents are gonna have to be involved with that too, and if everyone is part of the plan, right? Then you can do it.
Sure. Good, good. And my husband, yeah, we talked to my husband. He teaches at an autism hub. And he said basically the same thing, you're rewriting parts because you don't have an oboe player and
Yeah.
you're, doing all this. So what's the difference between that and rewriting a part for somebody who needs a simplified part? You just do it. And, like you said, you roll up your sleeves and go into band director mode and solve the problem.
Right. And yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that because a real hobby horse of mine as an adjudicator is when adjudicators are a little bit doctrinaire, charitably speaking, with the ensembles they're judging, and they they'll see two horn players or three horn players or one or none, and on their judges tape they'll just keep talking about the lack of horns, right? And then they'll lower the score. Meanwhile, there might be dozens of other students on that stage playing great and working really hard that have had the benefit of really terrific teaching, and all this adjudicator can focus on is that we're short horns. And
Yeah.
I'm like, I get it that part's not there, or that a saxophone's playing it, and blasphemy to have a saxophone cover a horn part, right? Like I understand that artistic impulse, right, to preserve the art. I mean, I get that. We're all trained to do that, and we're an oddly conservative profession that way, I think sometimes.
Sure.
But at the same time, I identify as an educator, which means I'm always looking at, listening for, and trying to find evidence of the teaching that goes on.
Sure.
Right. And if it means that it doesn't, if it means that my ears are not hearing what my eyes are seeing exactly 100% because we're missing this, or we had to rewrite this, or there's an accommodation we had to make, well, great. Right.
Then yes.
Yeah. And I don't even need to remark on it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Because the conductor knows, the band director knows. They don't need some guy they've never met to be like, hey, yeah, that part's being played in clarinet, but it's written for something else. Like, that, right?
Yeah.
Of course they know that.
We wrote it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why I loved, when I finished, before I moved to the university, Michael Sweeney was just coming out with his grade 3 arrangements of like really advanced music, because his thing was most people don't get far enough in bands to be able to play Holst. They don't get far enough to play Granger. So he wrote grade 3 kind of reductions to allow young people to experience what we consider to be kind of the greatest music of our canon.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah,
so
and that's a great point. And those arrangements are I don't think as much now, but sometimes they can be a little polarizing in band land. And
well, sure.
I come down where you come down. I think the access is more important.
Yeah, I played the Holst suite once. It was a bad decision on my part to try to play Holst. I mean, we did as well with it as a middle school band is going to do, even with the reductive part. But of course, everybody who's listening is listening for the professional part. And so I shouldn't have tried it, but I did, and the kids really enjoyed it, and I would do it again, even knowing what I know now.
Yeah, students like to be challenged. They like to know that they're being that you're expecting something of them, but then they also want to see you have the tools and the willingness to help them achieve it, right?
Sorry. A few years later, you should have seen the phone calls when they got to high school and played the actual version. Sure. And they're like, it's so different. I'm like, I know, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think giving students those kinds of opportunities is really good, and I would do the same thing.
All right. Well, I actually have to teach a class, but if you have any final thoughts, we'd love to hear them.
I don't think so. Just that, we got very lucky that not that we had a dog in the band and it got us a lot of attention. We got very lucky that we got a terrific student like Gabby,
Sure.
Because she is. She's a great kid, and the people around her, that section leader I was talking about, is another terrific kid. Like my kids are really good. They're good people, and just ha- getting a student like her and offering her and being able to give her the experience she was looking for was very affirming to me, and it's what I entered this profession to do. So um, that has been the biggest sort of like benefit to me as a professional, I think. And I hope that your students will feel empowered to be open-minded too.
Thank you so much, and thank you for taking a chance and, and for sharing with us, because you could have just done it and then, kept all of your secrets to yourself. But all right.
Well, we're band directors. We like to talk, especially about ourselves. So.
Yes, we do. And our bands, and yes. So thank you so much. And this brings us to the end of our episode. Thank you to Dr. Mertz for joining us to discuss having a service dog in the marching band. We hope you feel inspired, equipped, and ready to work with the disabled musicians in your community. If you learned something here, please like and subscribe to our show and return next semester when we restart in January for our next episode. Until then, this is Dr. Tina Holmes Davis reminding you that small efforts create meaningful results.